Welcome to ISA Insider News, everybody. My name is Max Tim.
And I'm Shayna Weber, and the headline of the week for March 7th is all about the Batman.
The Batman, with a little Cyrano thrown in there.
A little bit.
It wasn't the opening weekend for Cyrano, but yeah, the Batman opened up to $128 million over this past weekend, which I think shows that people are desperate to get back to the theaters.
Well, yeah, and it's Batman.
And it's Batman. But the thing is, I'm looking at my phone, everybody, because I need to reference our wonderful friends over at boxofficemojo.com, which if you have not heard of boxofficemojo.com, you should check it out. It's free. And it shows you everything that's been tallied for the weekend. But yeah, $128.5 million for the Batman on its opening weekend. Number two, Uncharted came in with 11 million. It's a 52% decrease from the previous weekend. And the reason we brought up Cyrano is because of the idea of this kind of, I don't know about new landscape, but the landscape of opening weekends, theater, theatrical releases and streaming releases for movies.
Weekend matters.
And the weekend, it matters. And I think it shows that people are, like I said, desperate to get back into the theaters. But I mean, how excited is this for you, Shayna, to be able to see that people are going back to the theater?
I mean, I'm excited that people are going back to the theater. I don't know that I've gone to the movie a few times during all of this craziness, but I don't know that I'm excited to go to a crowded theater. So I think that here in LA, especially, they have the great movie theaters that have like the big couches that you can sit on and you're kind of separated. So I'm going to stick to those theaters. I'm definitely going to go see Batman, but I haven't yet. I'm definitely going to go see Uncharted, but I might save that one for home when it gets here. And then Cyrano, I want to see in the theater because Joe Wright's my favorite director.
Oh, okay. So it's interesting because Cyrano is one of those movies that I'd be perfectly fine watching it at home. I'm kind of a homebody when it comes to watching movies anyway. I bought a huge screen TV. I have a surround sound, so it's slightly different, but it doesn't match the experience of going to the theater.
It's an experience, yeah.
It's a total experience. You actually spend time, you get in the car, you go to the theater, you go with some friends.
Don't look at your phone.
Yeah, right. You put the phone down. I'm just used to being on the couch, which I think is something that the theater chains and just theatrical distribution in general is going to have to get used to.
If you go to one of the theaters where you can recline back in your chair, it's great. It's super comfy. You feel pressure not to be looking at your phone every 2 seconds. You just turn it off.
Yeah.
You eat your bucket full of popcorn with no guilt and you enjoy yourself for 2 hours or 3 hours with Batman.
Totally. And I think this is a little reminiscent of, I don't know about reminiscent being the right word, but it's no surprise that the Batman made more money than Cyrano. And the reason I'm comparing the two is because a little bit of a review that I read, they mentioned that it was Cyrano, monochromatic sadness, which in a lot of ways we're living that every day as it is. And so I don't know if a lot of people want to necessarily experience monochromatic sadness. And especially when you compare that to, the Batman's just kind of mindless escapism in a good way. It's just adventure and it's fun and action and thrills. Plus it's a built-in audience kind of thing.
Yes, with Uncharted. I mean, it's a fun fantasy,
right?
Outside of the chaos and madness that's happening in the world, and just escape for 2-3 hours and have fun.
Yeah. I don't really see this being some level of, oh my gosh, movie theaters are back 100%. But broadcasting from where I'm broadcasting, I drive by the one theater that's within like a 20-mile radius. Even on a Sunday night, last night, it was packed. And so a lot of people in small town America do kind of want to get out and experience things because there isn't as much of that danger compared to it being in a city. You just have more people. So it's smart, Shayna, like you're saying, that you pick the right theaters and the right times. For me, I would rather go during the afternoon or a matinee just because I don't want to deal with crowds. I don't like dealing with crowds even without a pandemic, but it'll be interesting to see how things carry on here because we have some pretty big releases coming out the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think that having a huge blockbuster like the Batman is a good jumping off point. So people go, okay, I'm going to go to this, and then they'll feel comfortable going to the next one, maybe to the next one, to the next one. Maybe we'll get back we'll get back in the swing of things.
Totally. I mean, if you look at total grosses, it doesn't seem that different from previous years. I mean, we have even Sing 2, his total gross of $153 million. Spider-Man is just doing unbelievably. It's $786 million. Dog, even Dog. This is with
Channing Tatum.
Yeah, Channing Tatum. Even that has grossed 40 million. So I think it shows, like, that's the type of movie that you could easily just hang at home and watch that on the couch. It has some fun action sequences, but it's showing people are going to the theaters here. Uncharted has a total of 100,000. Not a huge game franchise, but I think the cast made a big difference. Even Scream has a total of $80 million total. I said total twice. So it's showing that, yes, the world's opening back up, but also that people are eager to and willing to go to the theater, which I think is it's hugely positive, but I don't think it's going to change anything from a streaming perspective.
Right. I don't think so either. They're
still going to be releasing movies. And I think I see the opportunity for smaller movies that wouldn't normally get a wide release to find that much more of a home. I think it's really positive news here, because it's not like streaming is suddenly going to slow down and we're going to be seeing fewer movies get released on those streaming services and then everything's going to go back to the theaters. I think we're going to be seeing that much more of an opportunity for movies to see that much more of a wider audience. I think it's great.
Well, hopefully it just shows there's enough for everyone, and you can go to the movie theater or you can watch it at home.
Yeah. So that's our top headline of the week. Every week we're going to be highlighting some level of the major headline. Everybody's probably heard that the Batman has done so well. It's really not that big of a surprise in general, but it is pretty positive news to see that big of a box office.
It is big news to hear that people are loving another version of Batman, to be honest.
That's true. Yeah. From a review standpoint, for the filmmakers, for Robert Pattinson, it's great news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not a bomb. Like, it's not like, oh, it's so bad. It's just exciting that there's a good, fun, a movie with some darkness and a superhero, and it's doing well and well received. Yeah. All right, moving on to this week in ISA Insider. If you have not checked the ISA Insider out, you should go to networkisa.org and go to the ISA Insider. It's where you can get your hub for news and headlines and a whole bunch of other things, podcasts, a bunch of things. And obviously our new show is called ISA Insider News. So we're going to be referencing an article, at least one per that page. And today, what we're going to be referencing one by our friend Jim at Creative Screenwriter Magazine, how to write a contained film. I mean, a contained film, a film set in one location. There you go. Yeah, it's pretty basic, pretty simple. I think it's an important one to make. For lower budget productions, so that you can get more out of your budget, and for newer filmmakers who are trying to make that first film or their second film, it's a really good way to have high production value with lower cost. And it's a way for some lesser named actors who have not yet found, the spotlight like they deserve. It's a great way for them to start. Jim has some really great examples in here of, obviously, examples of contained films, and I'm looking at it on my iPad here, but some examples are pretty obvious. Phone Booth, Panic Room, Disturbia, Buried, pretty ingenious location. Most of it took place in a coffin. But he also references some examples, which I think is interesting. Is Titanic a contained film? Is Star Trek a contained film because it all takes place on a spaceship, which I know it technically doesn't. But you had a great answer to that, Jana. Well, technically, I think what a contained film means is that you're not doing any company moves. So what happens in your schedule is you can have a shorter schedule, which means less money. If you're doing moves to different locations and then having to set up there and do all your prep and everything there, then you're wasting time in your schedule. So if you can do everything in one location, and it can be a house where you're using multiple rooms, it can be in an office building where you're using the basement and an office room, a conference room, anything like that, that still works as a contained movie. You're all in one location. It doesn't mean in Phone Booth, you're not in the phone booth the entire time. That is very specifically contained and amazing, but you can branch out a tiny bit. Like if you find a really great old house, like our own Jaron Lauder made Stay Out of the Beeping Attic, that was all in one house. And so that was a contained movie, and it was a smaller budget, and it worked.
Yeah. I think it's important to remember that the term contained pretty much comes from a production standpoint. It's contained because you're keeping the crew and all the talent and everybody in one location. Die Hard, you made a nice comp earlier, Shayna, that arguably Die Hard is contained.
Well, it could be if their production was contained. If they really were in, what is it? Oh, I'm gonna mess it up. What tower? Yakatomi?
Yakatomi. I can't remember now.
If it was actually there, and they
Nakatomi.
had access, if they had access to the building and the actual like air ducts and the roof and the office buildings, sure, that could be contained, but it wasn't, because it was obviously, much bigger than that.
Yeah. A couple things that he notes here. He mentions in the article, I'm just reading straight from the article, given that there is less room for cinematic spectacle in contained stories, here are some ways for screenwriters to enhance the grip of their screenplays. I'm not going to read all of them, but he has some really solid lists here, or a list that's really solid. I think the point to remember, though, is that he says here are ways for screenwriters to enhance the grip of their screenplays. So even though this list is in an article about contained thrillers, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to only pertain to contained thrillers, such as a roller coaster of emotion highs and lows. It sounds like a no-brainer, but Shayna and I read a lot of screenplays, and it's kind of incredible how often we notice that there isn't an up and down. We're just kind of staying in one level of emotion. And so you have to be hitting those sequential order of the structure beats.
And most contained films, they tend to go into the horror or thriller kind of genre, so you definitely need that roller coaster of emotions if you're going to pull off anything in those genres.
I think a key is a strong dilemma or moral crisis, especially when you're dealing with something that is so contained as just a one house type of ghost story or something. It's not just the monster, so-called, that is the crisis. There's something else going on, even in, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of an example, but you could bring up just about an old movie called The Changeling. It's one of my favorite ghost story movies with George C. Scott. There was a crisis he was going through personally, that he had just lost his wife and daughter in a car accident. He was making a new start. He had just started a new job. There are all these other personal things going on in that character's life that then adds to and is, added layers to the primary plot crisis. So I think that's key when you're thinking about a form of a contained thriller.
Definitely.
Well, I think you should be reading as much as you can from ISA Insider. This is a great article from Jim and Creative Screenwriter. It was just recently released. We have a whole bunch of other articles like this on the ISA Insider. You should check it out.
And they are updated daily. So you can go on there in the morning, do your Wordle, check out your ISA Insider News, have your coffee or your tea, and then get on with your day.
Speaking of Wordle, moving on to personal news. Also, we're going to be looking at the Twitter sphere, what's going on Twitter, ISA events, what we're watching. We'll talk about that a little bit. So this is more of a Shayna and I going back and forth, but your personal news in terms of Wordle.
Well, I only started Wordle. Let me just be clear. I only started Wordle a couple of weeks ago, and I'm now at my 18 Wordle streak, which I'm
What does that mean? Because I don't play Wordle. For those of us who don't play, what does that mean?
Wordle's just a game where you're guessing. You have 6 chances to guess a 5-letter word. So you have 6 tries to guess the 5-letter word of the day. And if you guess them right every day in a row, I have 18 days in a row of the right word. So yeah, it's a fun, simple game that you can just do, and it's a brain builder.
Got it. Yeah, because you said you do it in the morning. I think for writers in general, it's good to be exercising regardless physically, because we sit so often, but then also to be exercising the mind. I play Words with Friends on a more than just daily basis. I have not tried Wordle. I guess I'm scared that I'm going to get hooked on it.
Yeah, but it's literally about 3 minutes. It's not a game that you can keep going. It's one word of each day, and that's all you can do. And then you have to move on. It's great. It's kind of the perfect thing to be addicted to because it's 5 minutes.
Okay.
Great.
All right. I'm sold. I'm going to have to do it. What are you watching? I'm curious. We're going to get to a really interesting Twitter hashtag situation that's been going on, but among screenwriters here in a little bit. But I'm curious what you're watching, Shannon.
I finally just watched the pilot for Bel-Air, which I was absolutely floored by how much I liked it.
Really?
It didn't conflict with the comedy, sitcom. I thought they did an amazing job of just reimagining it in a drama.
Right. It's a straight drama. It's not like there's no comedy in it necessarily.
Oh, it's a straight drama.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like young. It feels like a, young kind of YA, young adult kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's great.
Okay.
I'm super excited for it. And we just did an ISA Presents chat with Jashika and Janika James, who are the co-executive producers of that show. And I had meant to watch it before I spoke to them, but I didn't get to it. I was finishing reading their book. So I'm glad that I finally watched it because it's very, very good. I'm very excited for them.
And is that event on Pro Tips yet?
Yes, it just went up, I think, yesterday. So it is currently up there. Go check it out. It's a great talk. They are exceptional women and very inspiring. And the great thing is that they're really just like us in terms of people who came to LA, no connections, worked really hard as assistants, worked their way up, became staff writers, worked their way up, and are now co-executive producer showrunners. So it's great.
It's awesome. I'm happy to hear that Bel-Air is doing well because they really went crazy with the marketing, like so many different commercials, and it seemed just so melodramatic, and it just didn't click in my brain compared to what I knew of the previous series, obviously. But
it's kind of fun to see how the new character of DJ Jazzy Jeff, how they made that character, or the new Carlton and how Carlton is. It's kind of really fun, and you get the nostalgia from it, but it's a totally different way of looking at it, which is kind of exciting from a writer's standpoint.
I was going to say, because if you think about it, doing like just a reboot instead of a reimagining, there's no way it's going to feel fresh.
No.
But it's not going to be funny.
Yeah, this is dramatic and it feels young, but feels current. And it feels like it's dealing with the issues of today, of teenagers and young adults. It's very cool.
All right. Beautiful. I'm watching, Resident Alien is one of the funniest shows on TV. Ghosts is on CBS. You can watch it on Paramount Plus. It's a remake, or I guess, remake of a UK series, a British series called Ghosts. And it's about this young couple that inherits this gorgeous they're going to turn it into a B&B. It's a giant mansion. And it's haunted by, I think, like 7 or 8 different ghosts. And it's hysterical. It's
doing really, really well.
It was
like a sleeper hit for them. They didn't think that it was going to be that great. And it's just doing amazing.
It's just, and I'm so glad to hear that, because I haven't done any research in terms of, what are the ratings or anything, but it's just candy. You just sit down and you're like, oh, I cannot wait to experience what each of these characters are going through, because it's a really great study for writers in voice, because every single ghost is incredibly different and unique. They all have very specific backstories, which they get into. The young couple, the 2 actors that play the young couple are really good. It's cheesy when it's supposed to be, but I love it. But
that's good. I want to watch that, because I used to watch iZombie with the lead Rose Ivor.
Oh, Rose McGowan, yeah, or not McGowan.
Rose Ivor, I think.
MacGyver, yeah.
Yeah, she used to be on iZombie, and I loved her in that show, so I was rooting for her. So I'm glad to hear it's good.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, anytime you or I get something incorrect, we're going to have Scott put exclamation points on the bottom of the screen and be like, "This is how you say it." Used to. But yeah, Resident Alien is hysterical. Such a great situational comedy, but it's a serialized show. And then Archive 81 on Netflix. I keep asking people if they've seen it, and they haven't seen it, and I think it's because the trailers and the promotional clips that they use on Netflix are so uninformative that you don't really know what the show's about, and it's kind of cheesy. But it was really cool. If you like kind of weird mystery, ghost, and paranormal stuff, it's fun.
Interesting. I've never even seen it pop up but then again, I'm on Netflix Kids a lot of the time, so
That makes a
I
difference.
guess I probably have to look for it.
All right. So what is happening in Twitter universe? You noticed something recently, Shannon.
So the last few days, I've seen a lot of Twitter chatter or Twitter drama, as they call it, about what's more important, having great connections or having a great script. And it's kind of faded out a little bit. I think that everyone got their anger and feelings out. But it is a good question. And I what I was reading is everyone had totally different viewpoints. Everyone's like, no, you have to have a good script. And then there are people who are like, if you don't have any connections, what are you going to do with the good script? So it was straight up Twitter drama. And yeah, it was actually quite entertaining. So thank you, Twitteries.
Tweeties.
Twitteries.
Yeah, I think it is a really good question because it is a total chicken or egg type of situation.
Yeah, it totally is. It's the chicken and the egg.
I think this is such a semantical, if that's a word, answer. For a long-term career, I would say script first. If you are a one-hit wonder, yeah, connections, because they're going to find an idea that you might have and you can just hand it off to them and then they're going to do something with it. But it's also so relative to.
I think they just go straight together. I think that you have to have a great script and you have to make a great connection and then you have to hand them the great script.
Right.
If you have a great connection and you don't have anything to show for it, then you lost your shot. If you have a great script but you have nowhere to send it, you lost your shot. So I think they're parallel to each other. I think they're just the same.
And as you were saying that, I also kind of see why there might be an argument for great script first, because if you have a great connection, you don't technically have anything to give them. If you don't have a great script.
Are you kidding? People do it all the time. It's called failing up.
I suppose great script.
Men do it all the time, Max. Failing up.
Failing up. This is true. And it could just be based on a pitch. So you may not need to have the script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You better have something to back up when you reach out. You better have something great.
Yeah, I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. And really, I'm also just
really get to where you're going. You have to have something great. If you have a mediocre, sure, you might get somewhere. But just like imposter syndrome, if you have something mediocre, it's ultimately going to catch up to you at some point.
Yeah. And it is a really good question. I don't know if there is necessarily the perfect right answer, but I agree, Shana, that they go hand in hand. Although we should maybe put an emphasis on the word great, because you may not need a great connection, because a lot of writers don't necessarily have easy access to anyone that can offer a great connection. So cold outreach and then someone responding to you via cold outreach could be suddenly considered.
That's like good script, good connection. If you got a connection to Steven Spielberg and he said, oh, sure, I'll read your script, you better have a great freaking script.
Right.
To hand him.
This is true. Regardless, you've got to have some kind of preparation, whether it's a great pitch, a great idea. Usually the great idea is what's going to get noticed. And because people, I don't know how many times, just even in our own company with the ISA, there have been projects and writers that come through where we're like, you know what, this idea is so good. Let's talk to the writer and see what he or she might think in terms of a rewrite, or maybe trying to work on a couple of the elements because the idea is there. It's harder to get to the great idea, I think, if the idea isn't, because then suddenly it's a complete reimagining.
Yeah. There was also, it reminded me when I said imposter syndrome, there was a great resurfaced story on Twitter about a writer who was staffed on a show, and she made up a whole entire story about being a veteran in Afghanistan and made it through half the season before she was outed and found out and fired.
Wow.
Woo.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder, did she perform though? Was there, she had to actually.
What I read, she said she spoke 6 languages or something. And then she would always skirt her way around things. And it turned out that she had been in a writing group with some veterans and she was stealing their stories, and she stole a story from some short film.
Oh my goodness.
And she would do Google Translate and then come back in and say it's a lot of Twitter swindler guy.
Yeah. Tinder swindler.
Twitter swindler. She's the Twitter swindler.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot like that where you're just covering the lie with another lie and trying to get through it. I mean, she said she was always late apparently, and then when they called her on it, she said she was visiting her father who was dying from cancer or
Oh my
something. And
goodness.
then when the father came around, they were like, "Oh, we're so sorry." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, it's like straight up con woman stuff.
Yeah, that's total con woman stuff.
And then I
So
heard the reason it popped up again is because she was trying to get partners in a production company to finance her production company, and she was
wow.
found out again. I don't know her name and I don't know anything about the show, but it's just
Wow. Yeah, we're not necessarily here to point fingers. This is more of just example for example's sake.
but if
Don't
I
lie.
find out who she is, I will say her name because
Okay. Well, I think the moral of this story is just be honest and truthful, for crying out loud. It seems kind of even silly to have to say that, but in the world of today, sometimes that has to be stated.
integrity matters, people.
Integrity totally matters. Our next little segment is going to be in the future focusing on spotlighting some emerging screenwriters, referencing useful links, and viewer mail. We do have a question that we're going to throw out to everyone watching, but I'm going to have Shayna give her answer here because it's a good answer. But we're going to be doing this in every episode: viewer mail, emerging screenwriter spotlight. Today, just the viewer mail though. So we got a question from Jessica in Birmingham, and she is asking what the most important component of a pitch should be, or what is it, and if you had to only choose one.
Well, Jessica, my answer would be the setup, where you are letting the person you are pitching build the world in their head. And I'm talking about knowing if it's a film versus TV, what genre it is, what the setting is, who the main character is, where they're at, so that I, as a listener, can say, okay, I know where we're at, and then you can take me on the story, into the story.
Yeah, it's getting the listener, whoever is receiving the pitch, on the same page as you as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because we know everything there is to know about our project. The person listening to the pitch, this is completely fresh, brand new. They have no idea. Sometimes they don't even have a log line. They might have a log line, but the log line is sometimes forgotten because they take so many pitches during the day. They're like, okay, who's next?
Yeah,
and so you got to get them
standing in a white room.
right.
That's how I picture myself, just standing in a white room surrounded by whiteness, and I'm filling in little nuggets of the world around me, so then I'm there.
That's great. Yeah, because once you start delving into character descriptions and episode descriptions and backstory, if they don't have that foundation of what the story is, they
don't know where they're going, and they're playing catch up the whole time to try to go, wait, am I in America now, or is this future, or where are you're constantly playing catch up to try to figure out where you're at, and it's hard to hear the great details once you get to them.
Yeah, which really could be used for your own development purposes too. Even if you're not pitching, you should be able to say that to yourself to try to figure out what's the core element, what's the most unique element of my story, and get to that pitch in your head, whether you're preparing to actually pitch the project or not, because that's then going to remind you, here's what I'm supposed to be writing too. This is the whole second act of my movie, or here's what the core of, the DNA of every episode is supposed to be. So
yeah, and that can start in two ways. It can either be the world, or you can start with the character. So sometimes if it's most important for you to tell us about the character and then tell us where they're at, do that. If it's more important to set up the world so that we know we're in the future in a dystopian society on a different planet, then do that first. Yeah,
everything's relative, but good question. I think we all should be thinking along those lines of whether you're preparing for a pitch or not, you need to be looking. All right, my favorite, and I shouldn't be speaking for Shayna, but I have a feeling it might be one of Shayna's favorite segments of the show. It's the good news portion of our episode. We're always going to be finishing an episode with good news of the day or good news of the week. And this is a really simple one, but I think it is very happy news because I love Guinness. But Guinness is brewing good by cutting carbon footprint of its barley farms. I think that's very happy news. But it also ties into what you're trying to do, Shannon.
Oh, well, Max told me the headline earlier, and then I said, oh yeah, well, I'm getting a composter. Well, because California's, they put into law, I guess, that we can't put food waste into the garbage, into the regular garbage by 2025. And so, and I feel like I throw away a lot of food. Like I'm one of those people who goes and buys vegetables and then,
Oh, I'm the worst.
throws them away
Yeah.
because I don't eat them because I'm terrible.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, if I can at least put them in the composter, then I can be useful and then I can feel good about myself once I put it in my garden.
Yeah. And even just
Grow the vegetables that I won't eat
you
again.
might as well just be throwing money into the garbage can. I don't know how many times I've
Oh.
wasted an entire pack of spinach. I just forget that it's in there.
It's like every week. I'm like, oh, great. Let me empty the vegetable drawer again.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
This is obviously what Guinness is thinking, because the project is also going to use fewer synthetic fertilizers, which can hurt the environment by killing beneficial bacteria in soil or contaminating the nearby plant life and water supply that people and animals eat and drink, improving water quality, which also makes a healthier environment and healthier crops. I think it's just a no-brainer this is maybe just my opinion, but doesn't that only make sense?
Yes, and it's great that they're moving towards people breaking world records for our ecosystem. Great.
Yeah.
I love it.
And it gives me another reason to drink Guinness as often as I would like.
Great. Good time. Let's get Guinness as a sponsor.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll have one right here with me. Well, that's the show for the week, everybody. Shana, thank you for jumping on. We're going to do this every week, everybody. So get ready.
That was fun. Join us again for ISA Insider News next week.
Thanks, everybody. That was kind of a lame.
And done.
doing this.